program. It's a pleasure to see all of you here, and it's my pleasure also to introduce our speakers today. My name is John Sensendiver, and I'm a district supervisor with the Tigers Valley Conservation District here in West Virginia. Today on the program, we're going to actually have several speakers. I guess it's going to be kind of a tag team approach here. And we're going to start out with Dr. Rakesh Chandran, and then he has two partners here, Jamie Kinsey and Bruce Lloyd, and they will also be taking a part of the program. It's my understanding they will be making short presentations, and then they'll kind of all be up front here, and we'll have kind of a round-robin discussion, questions and answers and that sort of thing. We have an hour for the total program, so we'll begin here. I want to introduce Dr. Chandran first. Dr. Chandran is a professor at WVU. He's been there since 1999. His main job is extension specialist, extension weed specialist, and IPM coordinator. He also, in addition to his extension duties, has an applied research program, and he teaches courses. Also works and advises graduate students, and is currently president of the Northeastern Weed Science Society. In addition to Dr. Chandran, we also will have Bruce Lloyd to speak. Bruce is an extension agent in Lewis County, where he has been there for the last 22 years. And then Jamie, and I'm not sure what order you guys are going in, but Jamie says he will introduce himself, and so we'll let him do that. Rather than take up a lot of time, I will let them go. As they begin, I will be walking back down through here handing out evaluation forms. We are asking that you evaluate each session that you're in so that we have feedback. And as you leave then, would you please, there should be a box in the back somewhere to leave that in. Make sure you circle the correct session that you're in as we go so that we have the correct information, okay? At this point then, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Chandran, and he will lead the initial discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Sensendiver. Good morning to all of you. I'm happy to be here this morning. Beautiful day. Supposed to be in the 60s today, so make sure you go out there and get a chance to get some fresh air. It's the first good day of this year. But I want to thank the organizers to invite us to give this session on weed management in pastures, conventional weed management in pastures, and hay field. It's an important topic. And I believe there is another session later today which discusses with more non-chemical methods to control weeds, in similar situations. So make sure that if you're interested in weed management, that may be another session that you want to attend. But Dr. Sensendiver said it's going to be a very interactive session. So I'm trying to go over some of the basic information as it relates to this topic, and then show you some pictures and results of some of the related research, applied research that was carried out both at WVU and at different farms throughout the state, which will give you an idea of some of the things that work, some of the for specific weeds and some of the specific herbicides out there. So with that, why control weeds? I don't want to stand here and preach to the choir, but as you know, weeds compete with the desirable forage for nutrients, water, and in some cases sunlight. So overall, they reduce the productivity of a pasture or a hay field. So weeds are typically something that you don't notice as a pest. You don't see the results right away. And by the time they are evident, that's when they are in bloom. And by then it's probably too late to do anything about it, at least that year. So one of the key things that we have to keep in mind is that when weeds are young and actively growing, that's when they are competing with the crop, and that's when the demand for water and nutrients are the greatest for both plants, right? So it's important to, at least with some weed types, which I will go over in a few minutes here, to control weeds when they are young and actively growing. Now, having said that, there are perennial weeds for which we may have to wait for some time, wait little later, before they come to bloom, or shortly after that, to go about applying herbicides. And as you know, there are several weeds that are poisonous to livestock to varying extents, depending on how much they are consumed and what time of the year, what stage the plants are in. So when it comes to poisonous plants in the pasture, we have to really be aggressive to go after those type of weeds. There are several obnoxious weeds such as Canada thistle. That's one of the weeds that I get calls all the time every year, which means that there are a few herbicide options that are good job, but not it's not going to eradicate it with one application. So with some of those obnoxious aggressive weeds, the key thing is to stay persistent, not to give up. You may not see the results right away or even the next year, but then if you stay on top of it, repeat those applications with the effective herbicides for a few years, eventually you will be able to get a handle on those weeds. So multicolor rows, we have pretty good herbicides. Automotive, again there are some options. With some of the grasses, Johnson grass and Japanese stilt grass, as of now there are really no herbicides that can selectively control those grasses, but not remove not kill the forages, the desirable species. So in Johnson grass, a strategy would be to use one of those weed wipers that gives you an opportunity to apply herbicides when there's a high difference between the crop and the weed. When the Johnson grass gets tall, you can use Roundup, those weed wiper very carefully though, make sure that there is no drip, and then go over if it is present in high numbers, you can go over the entire field. But if it's growing in clumps here and there, for Johnson grass, the best method will be to do a spot application with Roundup. Japanese stilt grass is an invasive plant. Right now it's mostly a problem, in woodlots and in pastures that have borders or access to such situations. But I'm starting to see more and more Japanese stilt grass. It's an annual grass, unlike Johnson grass, which is a perennial grass. Again, there are no selective methods to control Japanese stilt grass. Maybe mob grazing, instances where there is high populations of such grasses would be one strategy. So I hope you were not expecting to walk away from this session with the magic bullet. Now, once I am here, having taken this program, I'm going to get rid of all the ways. No, so there's really no substitute for proper management practices. I didn't want to sound discouraging, but herbicides is in effect as a tool to manage weeds. They're effective, but it has to be done in conjunction with other cultural practices. So to reiterate, if you're establishing a new hayfield, for example, or renovating a hayfield, make sure that you invest in a good source of seed which has no noxious weeds and relatively free of other weed species, because you don't want to bring in problems into that area. if you're seeding or reseeding, do so at the proper time. So with cool season grasses, late summer, early fall is a good time to go back and seed or reseed. That will give you an opportunity to control certain broadleaf weeds if they start to show up later on in the season. Some cool season, some winter animals such as chickweed or dead nettle, etc. You can apply a broadleaf herbicide to control them. So if you're reseeding in fall, you may want to wait till spring to seed some of the legumes. That way you can control the broadleaves before you go back and reseed your legumes. You want to make sure that the soil pH and fertility are at the appropriate levels. Very important to rotate the animals. You don't want to the animals to graze too close to the ground. What happens is, if you cut too close to the ground or animals graze the ground too close to the ground, the root growth is affected. Okay, so what you see above the ground is actually a reflection of the root health beneath the ground. So you want to provide all the conditions that are optimal for good root growth and health. Same principle when it comes to cutting hay the right time and height. And you don't want to have any bare spots, because bare spots are going to be eventually filled up with weeds if you don't do anything about it. So if you notice bare spots, go back and reseed at the right time. Alright, so again, using herbicides, they are, as I mentioned earlier, they're effective when used on a need basis. And sometimes, even under optimal conditions, when everything is going well, when the growth conditions are good, you may still see weeds, and that's a good situation to use herbicides to knock those weeds back and give a boost or an upward edge for the desirable forages to compete with those weeds. And in some cases, you don't want to. You may not even have to kill the weeds. All you may have to do is stun them thoroughly so that they are stressed and not be able to compete with the crop. Which means that a herbicide which may not do a great job, as long as it knocks it back, as long as it stuns the weed during the early stages, that may sometimes be enough to to give the desirable species an upper hand. Herbicides are useful to reclaim unproductive land. For instance, you have areas of the pasture that are being taken over by brushes such as multifloral rose, autumn olive. Chemical weed controls can sometimes be the most cost-effective way to manage those type of brushes and bring them back to production. And I think I covered the last two bullets here about suppressing weeds during early stages and making sure that they're aggressive to control poisonous or noxious weeds. Alright, so timing of application. So weeds, as we know, it's important to be able to identify the weeds and understand their life cycles. So you have annual weeds and biennial weeds, which are in the same category when it comes to management. And then you have the difficult to control weeds, perennial weeds, which are the most troublesome weeds. So for annual weeds and biennial weeds, the best time to apply herbicide is when they are young, actively growing. Anywhere when they are in the seedling stage, before it comes to bloom. Because once they are in bloom, they get rough. It's hard to get the herbicide in. And not only that, by then they have successfully competed with the crop and done the damage already. So it's a waste of resources to do anything at that point. Now with perennial weeds, you may have to sacrifice if you have a major issue with perennial weeds. It may be a waste of resources to do anything first thing in the year. Early spring when they start to show up. And I will explain the physiology later. But the ideal application timing for herbicide, for in general, for herbicides to control perennial weeds is anywhere from the pre-bloom stage, right when they start to put the flower buds, and depending on the weed, till they come to bloom or even a little later. And occasionally, when with certain species, you may be looking into the late summer or early fall months, for this to coincide, the stage to coincide with the season. And typically during that time of the year, you may be looking at dry conditions in the soil, where there is not adequate levels of moisture in the soils. So you may not want to spray systemic herbicide at that time, because when the plant is under stress, it doesn't absorb the herbicide, and the herbicide doesn't get a chance to move within the plant system and do a good job. So you may want to wait till it rains, until there is adequate moisture in the soil when you are looking at a window for application of a systemic herbicide to go after perennial weeds. And with certain weeds, such as milkweed or hemlockweed, you may notice there's a waxy cuticle surface, which is the biggest barrier when it comes to herbicide uptake. You want the systemic herbicide to be taken up or absorbed by the plant leaves to be effective. So anything that would enhance that or facilitate the movement of herbicides, those conditions should be taken advantage of. For example, humidity, spraying on a humid day, the humid conditions of the atmosphere is supposed to solubilize the wax a little bit. Similarly, on a day when there is a little bit of dew on the leaf, in the morning, say 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, wait for the time when it's just about starting to dry. You don't want to spray when the dew is dripping, but about the time when they are starting to dry up, that's a good time to apply herbicide, because again, the dew will help to solubilize the waxy cuticle, and if you can time your spray accordingly, then that will be more effective. Warm conditions, sunny days. You don't want too hot days. Some formulations you got to be careful. They may be volatile, and if it's too hot, they may move with the atmosphere, with the air, and cause injury to desirable plants in the vicinity. And if the label says that you have to use a surfactant, please do so, because that is very critical for the herbicide again to gain entry to the leaves. There may be a few different types of surfactants. There are oil-based surfactants and there are non-ionic surfactants. So the label typically will tell you what type of adjuvant that you need to add into the tank. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go over a few slides to show some results of studies to control weeds. Smooth bed straw, it's a perennial weed, and when it's taken over, you can see the entire field, almost white in color with the bloom of this plant. They typically come to bloom, in early summer. So this was a study which was carried out at the agronomy farm in Morgantown, and this is how the control plot that was not treated looked like after 1 year. And within those two red lines is the plot that received the herbicide Milestone. The Milestone has the active ingredient minopyrrolate, does a really good job. So we had excellent control, more than 95% control in those treated plots. You can see the untreated areas, there's sharp distinction, clear distinction between that and the treated area. Our forefront, which is Milestone plus 240, again gave excellent control. Now, with Milestone and forefront, they are not restricted with herbicides, but you've got to follow the label carefully in terms of moving the hay and manure. If their fields are treated with this herbicide, because they are residual by nature, and the label tell you that you cannot move the hay or manure from farm where this herbicide is applied because of potential to cause injury, from mulch or manure is used in other crops later on. So that's one thing that you need to keep in mind when it comes to some of these effective herbicides. Crossbow, it does not have the residual problem, but you can see there were a few weeds here and there. So it was, it still gave decent levels of control. Something that is becoming more and more popular in the state is rotary weed wiper. So this is an equipment where you can control, as I mentioned earlier, tall-growing weeds such as Johnson grass or hemlock by taking advantage of the height difference, whereby this wiper you can adjust the height, set the height, and when you apply, and there's a tank where you mix the herbicide solution. Now, the label may not tell you the strength of the solution to be added into the tank. So for the rotary weed wiper, we have found by trial and error that a 5% solution works good for most herbicides. For example, Roundup, or Remedy or Forefront or Crossbow. Now with Milestone, it's much more concentrated, so you can reduce that to say 2% or so. This is where we had a demonstration in Fayette County. Brian Sparks did some work to control hemlock. And this shows you how it works. As you can see, these are the hemlock plants that are getting doused with the herbicide. And these are the spray droplets that came to contact. So you don't want 100% coverage. With systemic herbicides, a few drops here and there is all that's needed to get good control. Because these are it's much more concentrated than when you do a broadcast application. I'll show you results of a study that was carried out in the State Farm in Point Pleasant, where we did some work with tall ironweed. Ed Smolder and Rodney Walbrown helped me carry out this work. Thanks. So this is again the control plot or untrained plot that that did not receive any treatments. And on your left is is where the rotary weed wiper was used to the herbicide Pastures. And you can see that again the sharp contrast with untreated areas. Now this picture was taken 12 months after treatment, 1 year after treatment. Okay, so you really got good control from Pastures. Similarly, this is from Raison P+D. So again, you can see the untreated area here. Again, good control, good levels of control from Raison P+D. Sermon was not bad either. With Roundup, for some reason we saw higher levels of iron weight, so it did not do as good at the job as some of the other herbicides mentioned earlier. Now, apart from controlling weeds, this data set tells you that if you use the wick applicator or the spray and the weed wiper, you're rescuing the clovers. With the broadcast application, you're going to kill all the clovers, and you may have to go back and reseed the legumes later on. So this column tells you the number of clovers in each plot, and the untreated plot had 12 clovers in the unit area, and the numbers were more or less similar in the treated plots. There were really no differences for the most part. Canada itself, which herbicide does a good job to control Canada you know, I can share with you that it would be a magic bullet to control kind of this persistence, you know, staying on top of it, repeated applications with some of the herbicides that are partially effective to control this weed. So this is the control plot 1 year after treatment. This is where forefront was applied. Now there are the populations of Canada in the treated area are lower than the untreated areas, but still, you know, a single application is not going to do it. So this was photo taken 1 year after treatment. Now this material was hot, MAC 28, but as of now, we don't have it labeled. It's not available for use in Pastures yet. It was a product that was developed by DuPont, but I understand that Bayer now bought, you know, the chemical from patent from DuPont, and I'm not sure if it's going to be available or not for Pastures, but if it is, it'll be really good. I mean, from this slide you can tell that it does a good job to control Canada thistle. These are the bare spots that showed up later on where the Canada thistles were. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's important to go back and reseed some of these spots before something else like crabgrass or, you know, plumbous thistle or something else or bed straw takes over those spots. Blackberry. This is Karthik Blackberry. It's a tough weed that is not very prevalent, but if it's there, it's very difficult to control. So it looks like. So it belongs to the group of brambles, rubus species. It's got spines on the stem and on the leaves here, on the leaf stalks. So this was a study carried out near Whaling a few years ago, and this is crossbow. Pot that received crossbow 1 year after treatment. There was it suppressed it, but it really did not control all the brambles. Grace on Pimasti did not do well either. 1 year after treatment. Grace on Pimasti is typically a good herbicide. You know, it does broad spectrum of activity. It does a good job usually to control perennial weeds. But in this case, you know, it failed. So the herbicide that was most effective in this study was Surmount. So Surmount has an active ingredient called fluroxepir in addition to picloram, which is present in Grace on Pimasti. So that's what did the trick here. Okay. Surmount. Now we had carried out a few other studies to look at other brambles, again difficult to control brambles. And that compound that I mentioned earlier, the MAP28, I don't have slides here, but that did a fantastic job as well to control brambles. So if it becomes available, we don't have the trade name yet, but that's something to keep in mind. That's a good job to control brambles. But again, just like aminopyrrolate, the active ingredient that's present in milestone or forefront, it will have the same issues or concerns with residual, when it comes to movement of materials from treated fields. So this is just a summary of the data that I just, the study that I just described earlier. So as I mentioned, Surmount was the most effective herbicide, applied at 2 pints to an acre. Alright, now this is what you run into in perennial weeds. So this is broadleaf dog. And with most perennial weeds, you have this underground, storage organ, either a deep rootstock or tubers or rhizomes, which has all the energy that is stored as starches or complex sugars. So, if you remove the top growth, what is going to happen is it's going to come back. Okay? It's going to use some of the reserves to grow back. When you cut it back again, it will grow again. Theoretically, you can kill it by repeated cutting or repeated, mowing it back. Now, what some of the systemic herbicides do, if you apply it at the right time, is that when the plants come to bloom, most of this energy or the stored sugars are depleted by them. We still have some at that point. So that's when the plants are weak, relatively weak in terms of stored sugars. Now, if you wait too long, it's going to send those sugars back, and if you can apply the herbicide during that time, that gives better chance to, for it to kill the plant when it's at the weak stage. Okay, so based on the source to sink theory, that is the differential movement of sugars in the plant in a perennial weed. In spring months, during this time of the year, when everything is starting to grow, these sugars are going to be sent up for new growth. So the movement, the preferential movement is towards the shoot during this time of the year or a little later on. And again, once it comes to bloom, late summer, early fall, the flow of sugars is reversed. It's going back to the root system for storing new sugars for next year's growth. Again, if you take advantage of that flow with systemic herbicides, by timing the application of systemic herbicides during that time, that does a better job. So this was a demonstration that was carried out at the Rec Center when I taught weed science course 2 years ago. Same principle, you can say this was where dandelions, as you know, are simple perennials. It has a rootstock, a taproot. So this was on the right side where herbicide with 3 different active ingredients were mixed and applied. And you can basically there were some of the active ingredients that I mentioned earlier, growth related type herbicides, which control broadleaves. But the take-home message is that in the following year, so this was treated late fall, October 2013. But this picture was taken the next year, spring. So you can tell the difference. So, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is that it will do an equally good job to control the clovers too. So, if you have high levels or high populations of clovers, you can wipe out the clovers with a good system herbicide that kill the clovers. So this was taken late on June, 30th of June, from the same areas, from the same location. So this area is free of clovers, which was treated with herbicide. So those were all the demonstrations that I wanted to discuss with you. I wanted to quickly go over a few slides, show pictures of some weeds that are on the horizon. Japanese silk grass is an invasive plant. I mentioned this earlier. So it's an annual grass, it grows about knee height. That's how tall it gets. If you look at the leaf carefully, the individual leaves, it's asymmetrical. One side of the leaf vein is slightly wider than the other side. That's a key characteristic of this weed. Carolina elephant's foot, or simply referred to as elephant's foot, it's starting to show up. Have you noticed this plant? Have you seen this plant? It is purple to sometimes white blue. It's a tough weed. It's a perennial, and we don't have data on some of the herbicides that are effective yet. Perla mint was otherwise referred to as beefsteak plant. It's considered to be a poisonous plant too, consumed in large quantities. It's got a reddish purplish appearance on the underneath surface of the leaves, and also similar color on the stem, small hairs. And if you take cross section of the stem, it's almost square. It belongs to the wheat family. Want to keep an eye out for that. So with that, we'll have some time for questions. These are the folks who help with some of the various studies. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Lloyd, who is going to discuss with you some of the work that he got involved in controlling automotive. Bruce, you can keep the lights, keep the lights at that level.
Keep them down?
Yeah, okay. This doesn't try to.
Oh, they're on. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just advance that.
Let me have that.
question while you're switching.
Sure.
That beef steak, the
Right.
last one you showed, what kind of, how do you treat it?
Yeah, it's a good question. How do you control beef steak plant? Again, I don't have a whole lot of experience looking at different herbicides, but in general,
Excuse me, Rakesh,
yeah.
we can't hear in the back of the room what the question was, or
Okay.
what the answer is.
The question was, what are some effective herbicides for beef steak plant? The development that I showed last slide. So the answer is, I really don't have a strong reputation to provide now because I haven't done much work with it. But in general, plants that belong to the mint family, 2,4-D, dicamba does a good job. Dicamba, Banwell clarity, in general. So if you apply it at an early stage, it may again, it's just speaking on how some of these herbicides work with similar species, or something like forefront, which has a broad spectrum of activity. That may be something that you can try. Do you have a problem with that, ma'am?
They do in our community, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so as I introduced earlier, I started in Lewis County, I've been in Lewis County for 22 years, and I also, just to give you a little bit of my background, I also have a small herd of commercial beef cattle, and so my experiences come from both my work as extension agent doing some trials and also from trying to control some of the problem weeds on my own farm. When I started in Lewis County, over and over, the problem I heard was, we have this problem with autumn olive and we can't control it. Marble rose has been a brush problem for years, but there's a lot of things that will kill marble rose. Autumn olive was really emerging as the much more difficult to control weed. And so I started doing some trials on various kinds of application methods and herbicides and so on, because there really wasn't anything labeled to control autumn olive. And so we figured we got to have a solution to this problem. So came across some things that worked fairly well. There are some foliar applications that work decent. A basil stem application, which is a mixture with herbicide mixed with diesel fuel, works really good. Very effective, very effective. And for a lot of folks that have small areas that they can that have overgrown plants, that's where it works the best on is large plants. When you have small plants, it'll kill it, but it's very labor intensive and not the best use of the herbicide. But when you have the large plants, the big overgrown plants, that basil stem application is very effective and very good. However, when you get hundreds of acres, you just what do you do with that? When you have this plant out there that is covering hundreds of acres, and what do you do with it? So this slide here is showing one thing that we did in Lewis County last year, and this took a long time to put this together because this was a helicopter application, and they just won't come in for say 50 acres. They want large acreage to come in, set up, and so on. And we were probably 2 to 3 years just convincing the company to come and look at our site and to come in and do this. And so this is just one possibility. If you have maybe several people together that have a large acreage or something like that, you might look at. I know other people in our area that where it's more acreage than they can feel like they can cover. The basil stem application, I've used foliar application with boomless nozzles, where you can get out there. You don't have to have worry about the boom of a sprayer, getting torn up. And boomless nozzles are very effective if you can control the wind and so on. But what we did here was we really didn't have much control over the time of the year. Personally, I've had a lot of success foliar applications late in summer and early fall on brush species in general. Autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, marble rose. I sprayed them up into September, even early October if you don't have an early frost, and had very, very good success. Well, when we contacted this outfit, we didn't have much choice about when they were going to do it, because they had a certain time and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. So they came in, and they sprayed this in May 30th, I think was when they started, and then they worked over the next week or so. And they sprayed, here's the mixture they used, Tordon 22K, which is the same as Remedy, if you're familiar with Remedy Ultra, and a surfactant. Now, that's what they used on. There's the setup. They actually bring the truck in and they lay on top of the truck and the mixtures in the truck, and it's important that they be able to get to the site. You take a helicopter and just fly somewhere and go fill up, but they need to be able to get to the site because he's filling up about every minute and a half or 2 minutes. He's having to fill up, and he's only on that thing for about a minute filling up. It's very quick cycles back and forth. There it is spraying. But there you can see some of it's like it's planted. I mean, just solid automobile this place was, and you see a little bit of grass there and up that road there automobile. And this was a month later, right, Rakesh? That's what I was thinking. So you can see, really pleased with the results. If you look at this, here's down this road here, and there's a month later, and overall very pleased with the results. However, oops, is that the last one? Okay. So just leave that. So what we found is, and I have some pictures that aren't on here from in the fall of the year before the leaves went off, and there's plants that had green sprigs, there's plants that are still alive. I mean, that spray application did not kill everything, and the folks from the helicopter company, they said up front, we're not going to be able to kill this, and if you ever spray this stuff, you know that one application isn't going to do it. And so their plan is to come back in and in this spring and evaluate and decide what to do about it. My own experience with spraying autumn olive foliar is that it takes at least a couple applications to kill it. You come in and spray it, you kill a percentage of them, and you come back the next year and you spray them again. Because and I sprayed them in the spring of the year, and I thought I did a great job. And you can come back in the fall and you see some green on some plants. And it's just a tough plant. And that bush honeysuckle, Tartarian honeysuckle, if you have that, my experience is it's really tougher, way tougher than autumn olive to kill with the foliar application. I've got one over there on my own place that I've tried, I've sprayed, I know 4 different times, the same plant, and it still isn't dead. I'm going to turn over to Jamie in just a minute, but just to give you an idea of some other things I've done. I've used the wick applicator that Rakesh talked about. I have not used the rotary applicator, just a basic applicator. I've had really good success using that on hemp dog bane. I know that's a big problem with a lot of people, and so using Roundup on that applicator and hemp dog bane, I've had pretty good success. Ironweed and some of the others, I think you really need probably that rotary applicator to get the best results. Milkweed, I've sprayed some, and it's really tough if you have a milkweed problem. There's probably only a couple of herbicides that really would do a very good job with it. Probably Pasture Garden, Surmount, as you say. Yeah. He showed that picture of the dandelion, and we did a trial similar to that down there on buttercup. And you see buttercup in the spring, and at that time of year you see just how much of a pasture it invades. Later in the year when it's not in bloom, you don't see the flowers, you can't tell how much of the pasture you're losing because it kind of blends in with everything. Sprayed late in the year, I think it was October, and the next season there was the striking contrast not only in presence of buttercup and non-presence of it, but also in the utilization of the pasture. In other words, where the buttercup had been eliminated, the pasture utilization was just so much better. Yes?
What was used to treat buttercup and the dandelion?
Go ahead, Rakesh.
All right, so being in the turf, the question was what was used to treat the buttercup and the dandelion. So the herbicides that we used in the slide that I showed you, there were 2 different treatments. One was a tank mixture of triclopyr, which is essentially a remedy, and it included another active ingredient called mesotrione, which is really not available for pasture use, but they're looking at it. It's there, it's labeled in corn, Callisto, Luminous, Lexa. But the trick was, so essentially triclopyr was what did the job. So you don't have to worry about mesotrione, that's the pre-emergence herbicide. So something like crossbow, remedy, or forefront, any of those would have done similar would have given similar results. Now, Bruce will tell you what he applied with for controlling grace on People's Day. Okay, so that was for buttercup, and there's another product called Overdrive, which is really good on buttercups. Now again with buttercups, you have to use a surfactant with any of these herbicides to get a good penetration to the leaf.
Yes. Let me ask you this. You was talking about your models where you were in Jane Lou. We got about 80 to 90 acres that we took from a farmer that were renting his ground that he just let go. Would you recommend, we talked about maybe renting a skid loader with a brush hog one to chew them up and then come back and spray with that application? Or what would you suggest there?
Okay, the question up here was if he has autumn olive that are out of control, would you go in with a skid loader or something and tear them out, and then spray, or just spray? How would you approach it? Basically, the question.
Yeah, I mean, which one would you rather do? Would you go in and just brush hog and spray them, or just burn the ground that's there? Which one would you rather do?
Yeah, when you have overgrown plants, it's difficult to do a foliar application and get good coverage. Like a helicopter, you saw that thicket, you would not be able to drive a tractor through that.
Yeah, because we was like we've been waiting for 5 years for them to come down and give us a quote for 310 acres on the hillside.
So if you can't get through it, your best bet probably is if you can remove the plants and by brush hog if they're small enough, or push them out if you have to, whatever. Realize the problem with autumn olive is that when you do that, you're going to have plants come back. Okay, that's why we have the problem so severe, because they will come back. They are terrific root sprouters, and they will come back. So when you remove them, you're not going to get rid of them. In fact, those pictures were on that farm there 5 years ago. That place was clean because they went in and removed them all, but they didn't spray them, and so you saw how they came back. So realize that's part of your overall plan. Though, when you remove the big plant, now you've got down to where you can get over that and get over top of them when they come back. The next year, you go in and spray, like with a boomless nozzle maybe, and you'll get 75% maybe. Okay, the next year, you try and finish up, and you just go back in, and then you get to where you're spot spraying. But when you have overgrown, you can't get through them at all. Either basil spray, which if it's too many acres, that's out of the question because it's just too much labor, or remove the plants and try and come back in and take care of it. Do not remove the plants and figure you're done, because you won't be. They're going to come back. Okay. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the basil spray? What's the best time of year? What's work best on that?
Yeah, sure. So basil applications, according to the label, can be done anytime during the year. That's one really nice thing about them. They can be done anytime during the year as long as snow or water doesn't prevent you spraying to the ground line. Okay. So I've done most of mine in this time of year. February, March, early April, that is the ideal time. For one thing, the plants are getting ready to green up, and so you're hitting right as they start to bring sugars up and so on. And also, a big thing, a real huge thing, is that the grasses and other plants around the autumn olive or whatever you're spraying are all beat down this time of year from snow and ice, so they're not in the way. The visibility on your plants is so much better than it is during the regular growing season. And of course, it's not as hot, so it's a lot more comfortable for you as an applicator. So it can be done anytime during the year. You're using Remedy Ultra is the best herbicide there, and according to the label, it's 20% herbicide mixed with diesel fuel. You use it in a backpack sprayer. You don't want to be using a four-wheeler or another tractor sprayer, because you got to get in close to the plants. And if you drive up to a plant and spray from a distance, you'll have a lot of overspray. The diesel fuel, that's part of that mixture that causes absorption into the autumn olive plant is going to cause burnout of the grasses that you overspray, and you're going to waste a lot of herbicide. So you got to do it with a backpack or a hand pump sprayer. I've used both, and either one works, just whatever your preference. And you just get up to the plant, you spray about 12 to 18 inches from the ground up all the way around the plant. And if it's multiple stem, which many autumn olive are, then you got to get around all the stems. And it's fairly labor intensive, but very effective, upward of 95% control. A lot of my trials, it was 100% control.
And 20% is the remedy?
20% remedy. Now, I'll tell you that I did some trials with much lower rates. The label rate is 20%. I went much lower, just trying to do some things, and I had decent control down as well, really lower even than this, but like 10% herbicide, which is half. You know, that's a lot of savings. What I found is as you decrease off that label rate, you really have to be very particular about your application that it's done correctly. Because if you miss a little bit or something, you're not going to kill that plant. Yeah. So keep your questions there. We'll turn it over to Jamie, and he's going to tell you about some things he's done.
I'll be brief because these guys carried a lot of points that I was going to bring up, but I am a cow-calf producer in Taylor County, and Father and I have always participated in spraying every year, and I've kind of carried that on and let him do some other things. But typically, we used to always use 3-point hitch sprayer on the back of the tractor, spot spray with either 50-gallon, 100-gallon, or 150-gallon sprayer, and that was kind of our routine with a and got ride the cab of the tractor and spray that way. That was kind of our routine, and we'd focus on your woody plants and so forth. We've utilized boom sprayers, boomless sprayers. We've utilized weed wipers in the wicks with some different successes on that. The one that we used to have mounted onto a front four-wheeler, and with the terrain that we have in our operation, it made for a challenge because our terrain was up and down. It wasn't flat ground, so the level of the wick applying to the ground was a challenge. We've utilized misters or blowers like you see in orchard fields, usually like a 50-gallon spray tank with a fan or a blower on the back of the tractor. Had various results with that. Dependability, we've had times when you use those misters and blowers, you can start, if your tractor's sitting right here with your fan and blower going that direction, you could paint that whole hillside right there. And that was nice for big clumps of autumn olives and so forth. But if you had a day that was extremely windy and you were trying to spray against the wind, it would just go straight up in the air like a little mini tornado. And you had to be careful with that stuff too, because if you were spraying near neighbor's property, you would look the next day and go, whoops, I went a little too far with this stuff, so you had to be careful with that as well. And we went to weed basil bark spray. That is a very good, effective method process if you have time to get in to do it. And we used to use the old tried and true, cut the plant down, like your autumn olives, your honeysuckle, and treat the stump with Tordon. That was kind of when we were a little bit younger on operation, we would do that. And predominantly now, we just spray a lot of times with our four-wheelers. We use about a 15 to 25-gallon sprayer and do some spot spraying. And we do have some boomless, or some booms that we have on four-wheelers, but that's kind of our option. And we'll put about 100 to 125 feet of hose on that so we can park four-wheelers and spot spray wherever we need to. Typically, we'll start spraying late April, 1st of May, and we focus on a lot of what these guys talked about: the monoflora, autumn olive, honeysuckle, hawthorns, and so forth. And we'll gradually get into hay season and then continue spraying. One of the few weeds that on one of our farmers will focus on goldenrod at time, and we will use our boomless sprayer or something of that nature. Focus on blackberry briars also in the spring. And then late summer, we'll finish up spraying with whatever we haven't missed. We'll get into the pasture fields a little bit with the cockleburs. Those are just more of an aggravation for us with the cows. A lot of times you see those cockleburs get at the udders of the cows, and just kind of more a nuisance. People in the sheep industry, the cockleburs are quite a big problem too. But the cockleburs, usually we'll use remedy or something of that nature. We usually got started on late July and try to finish up by Labor Day. And the funny story with cockleburs, I think we've all seen them. You can describe them as porcupine eggs is what they look like. And I had to describe that to my little daughter last week. We were sleigh riding and had one little bush of cockleburs still up through the snow. And she had her nice little pink snow pants on, and we went sleigh riding, went right through it. And of course, she walked through it, had them all over her pants. And she said, "Dad, what are these on my legs?" I said, "Well, those are porcupine eggs." And she said, "Dad, where's the porcupine live?" I said, "Well, I don't know, honey." But then last night, she woke up about 2 in the morning and heard a stray cat. She said, "Dad, is that porcupine outside?" But, and then we'll spray just a little bit in hay fields as well, with Canadian thistle and some dogbane and so forth. But these guys mentioned the key word today was control. And that's my biggest thing. When you do spray, it's not a one and done, I win. I'll come back 10 years later. Every year in our operation, our budget, we plan to spray. Some years it varies how much we do get to spray, but that's something we always try to spray. We utilize primarily just remedy. Been using Pasture Guard the past couple of years as well. Always make sure you have a surfactant with it. And the big thing too, when I do go out and spray, you follow rates. Talk to someone that has sprayed before. I utilize my Southern State store manager that does a lot of spraying, and I'll converse with him on what he's been spraying, how he's been, what he's been using, and so forth. Because there's nothing worse when you spend your time, your labor, and you go out and spray, and you didn't have very good kill on anything. There's nothing. That's like going fishing and not catching any fish. That's how I've always described that. And I'll kind of leave it at that.
One of the things I thought of while Jamie was talking is, I was just talking to somebody on the phone about this a couple days ago, was spraying fence rows. A lot of us have electric fences. If you don't have electric fences, I like to keep them kind of cleaned out. And my experience is don't use Roundup. Roundup is non-selective, kills everything. And that's nice when you first spray. But then what happens, if you do that early in the season, what do you have later in the year? You have weeds in there because Roundup does not have any residual activity, doesn't have any soil activity, and so something's going to grow in that bare ground there. And so one year I made a mistake. I thought, Jim Garrett was talking earlier how he'd been on this all these years, and he made this mistake. I did this kind of same thing. I had some Roundup in the tank from spraying something else. I thought, I'll just spray this fence row. Had nice grass underneath the electric fence. I sprayed it, and a couple weeks later, I had beautiful bare ground underneath of it. And then a couple months later, I had nothing but weeds underneath of it. Well, I'd much rather have the grass, right? Because the grass is going to, as it gets through the season, it's going to basically be dormant anyway, and that grass ain't going to hurt the fence at all. And so, unless I have to have the Roundup for some other reason, I always spray my fence rows with remedy or something of that nature that it's a broadleaf, unleaf kind of thing. I take care of most of the herbaceous weeds, take care of the brush, and leave the grass there. So, questions?
What's the cost of the helicopter application?
The cost of the helicopter application, and that costs $100 an acre. And I didn't mention, that slide showed that particular mix. Some other of the area that was not all autumn olive, that had some other weeds in it, they decreased the Tordon, I think, and added 2,4-D to that mix, but it was all the same cost, $100 an acre. And that can be pretty expensive. To get them in there, we had, to even get them to come, we had probably, I don't know what the total final was, probably 700 some acres. It wasn't all contiguous, but it was, there was probably 400 acres that was contiguous, and the rest of it was different places around. So if you have, like a lot of people say, well, I've got like 60 acres or something like that with all brush, and that probably won't get them there. You have to have a good bit more than that to get them to attract them.
Who'd you use?
It was Summit Helicopters out of Virginia.
I think most of us can read directions and figure out how to apply, but the question is, when do we apply? When does it get bad enough that you say, yep, I'm going to go in there and spray? Do you have any rules of thumb that you can offer on that, or?
The question was, when do you apply? So again, that depends on the weed species.
No, I'm not talking about when during the year. I'm talking about when for a given weed is the infestation bad enough that you say, yeah, I can't live with that anymore, I've got to spray.
Yeah, again, that's a judgment call that you make based on how noxious, how troublesome the weed is. But some of those weeds like Canada thistle, the sooner the better. We don't want them to stay there and explode the population. So because once you have those creeping roots build up, it's going to be lots more take you lots more time and effort to clean it up. So the old adage, the stitch in time saves 9. So that's the key principle when it comes to perennial weeds. The sooner the better. We don't want to wait. With other weeds, again, summer annuals, most of the weeds are palatable when they are in the early stages. So in small populations, there's nothing really to worry about it. But with poisonous weeds, again, you want to be aggressive. It's stay on top of poisonous weeds, manage them. You want to let them come to bloom and set seeds, and build up that seed bank. So
Rakesh, how would, with your livestock, if you see performance in your livestock, if you're seeing, if you got cattle, you're seeing weaning weights, you're seeing those availability in your weaning weights due to, if you do have some noxious weeds in your pasture field, that's also something to say, something's going on here, we're having problems, maybe we need to focus on eradicating something in our pastures as well. That would be something that would really be an indicator if you need to really take a big approach to that as well.
The other thing I'd add is, if we're talking about herbaceous weeds, is evaluate what you have out there in terms of clover right now. Because unless you're using a wick applicator, any of these things we've talked about are going to either harm or eliminate the clover. If you don't have any clover, then you might say, you know what, now's a good time to get rid of this weed, and then I'll come back and see if I can get some clover back in there. If you have a really good stand of clover, then it's like, you know what, I can put up with this weed for a while longer. That's one of the things really to look at.
This might be a little bit off subject. It's more a hay-related question than it is a pasture-related. We've had a lot of Timothy hay, and I understand that Prowl has been approved to use on Timothy to eliminate foxtail. We have a lot of trouble with foxtail coming up late in the summer after the first cutting of Timothy, kind of ruins the second cutting. You don't always get a second cutting anyway, but we really like to get that foxtail out of our Timothy fields. Have you had any experience or you know anything about this Prowl label for Timothy, and when did you apply it?
The question is about control of foxtail in Timothy, essentially.
Yes, so Prowl is a pre-emergence herbicide. It has an active ingredient called pendimethalin. So you have to, the key thing is to get it out before the foxtails germinate. So once they germinate, it's not going to do anything to it. So, really early summer or late spring is probably the time to treat it.
Should before you cut it or after?
Well, again, before the foxtails germinate, so it depends on where it is growing, and typically I would say they start to germinate, I would say early May. So I would time your applications in April, because once they have come up, it's not going to get them. So before May. Yeah. Now there's another herbicide called Paramount, which has the active ingredient quinclorac. It's just got labeled for pasture use. It's not as effective as Prowl in terms of re-emergence control. That's something to keep in mind.
What's it called?
Paramount, Paramount. It has the active ingredient quinclorac. It's again a pre-emergence herbicide, which takes care of annual grasses. Now, Prowl, we applied and we sent a petition to BAS, who is the manufacturer of the herbicide. So they're actually pursuing a label. I think they have all the data. Right now, the final stages for approval from EPA to get label in pasture. So if so, we'll have a tour for some of the annual grasses like crabgrass, foxtail, the Japanese tilth grass in pasture we used to. So they said 2016, but it could be even sooner or later.
I think we're into our lunch break at this point, and so I want to remind all of you to fill out the evaluation form, if you would please, circle E, and leave them on the table, the back table as you leave, and let's thank our speakers for this great program.
Hey, on milk thistle, did you say
Pasture Guard was good for it.
On milkweed.
Yeah.
Surmount's probably the best. Surmount's restricted use though, and so depending on whether you have that
How you
available.
spell that, Surmount?
Surmount. That'd be my first choice, but if you don't have a license or that's not available, Pasture Guard is not restricted use, so that'd be your first choice then.
I know we sprayed forefront on last year. It really didn't do the job. I thought, gee whiz.
I've tried forefront on too, and yeah, I was about like you, pretty disappointed.
What's the best use on Canadian thistle?
Probably forefront. I mean, it's going to be like he said, like Nikesh
Be
said.
persistent.
It's going to be have to be persistent.
And I'll tell you what, that stuff's getting me fish. I've got probably 15 bunches of it. And I thought a time or two I had it killed, didn't see anything. Next year, here it comes again.
Now, I'll tell you what I've done some in the pasture when I've been spraying brush. I have a four-wheeler with spot sprayer and remedy it. Spraying it and not decent. I mean, that'll help if you just have spots of it. If you have a whole field of it, you can't spot spray, that's different. You know, if you're out there spot spraying, you see it, remedy won't be used.
Well, I've done that, spot spray. I've hit it every time I go by it almost, think I've had it killed.
The timing is quite summer, midsummer is a good time. If you're later in the year, it's probably not really good. Don't look like that.
Well, later in the year is usually when I have the time, and first cut, a lot of times it don't come up as quick as grass does, cut the first cut off, then here it comes, and I've hit it then. Man, I tell you what, it keeps coming back. It's come in there, I think it's blowed off the trucks. It's coming in our country down there in the straw.
Where's that at?
Dogridge, Ritchie, Oxford, somewhere over there. I know they bought the pipeline, they did the pipeline, they started in there, you can really bought it 20 years ago, and I'm still doing it. And then I know a couple places along the road, I'm short load off trucks. And then I've just up the station, clear off the place, and dirt, and it just seems like here it is. That stuff's worth all along Maysville Road. I'm not gonna get there, but that's like Canadian business. Like Dad said, die and leave it.
I planted autumn in 1964, which I never had. It's a conservation practice that was approved.
Yeah, my grandpa did too back, I don't know when, but before I was old enough to remember, and that was the first question he asked.